On April 29, 1945, American troops liberated Dachau. What they found was haunting. 50 years later, about 2,000 survivors of Dachau and its network of brutal subcamps, along with several hundred of the liberators, returned, remembering the horrors, but also celebrating many remarkable moments of human courage and sacrifice.
I was thinking maybe I will find some people here that were with me. Maybe I'll find a friend, maybe I'll find a relative. God knows I need them.
I was hoping to meet some of my comrades in arms and many of the people that were liberated here.
Why have you come back? What is the meaning for you on that?
It's just a feeling that you want an excuse to come back, and it's 50 years.
This is the infamous Nazi concentration camp, Dachau. This is where the Nazis learned their trade and craft in torture, brutality, and death. It was here that hell on earth was opened up. It was here that humanity showed one of its darkest faces. But at the same time, there is incredible light that breaks through to shatter this darkness. I'm Bill Turpie. Join me on Why We Care for a look at some of the people who have returned here to remember those moments of both horror and hope for humanity. Just the name, Dachau, still conjures up moments of terror. The slogan on the gate, Arbeit macht frei, work makes one free, is part of the deceit and terror of this, the first Nazi concentration camp. Dachau is where the Nazis would first imprison their political opposition. Later they would bring additional targets like gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, and finally the Jews, all to be drained of resources and exterminated. Dachau was also the training school for the SS, the Nazis' elite troops responsible for guarding Hitler and exterminating undesirables. Dachau is now a memorial that was almost built over in Germany's post-war boom, but the survivors wouldn't allow that.
On the initiative of the survivors, they fought for the memorial. And then it developed over the years. It's in existence 30 years now. And it developed to an amazing point of, or place, location of international interest.
These are foundations for the former barracks at Dachau. More than 200,000 people were imprisoned here during Dachau's 12-year existence. About 30,000 people either died or were killed here. That doesn't seem like a lot in light of the 6 million Jews and many others who lost their lives under the Nazi horror, but it was here that the SS learned its techniques of raining terror on a prison population, techniques that served them well throughout the hundreds of camps like this that the Nazis ran. But despite the SS and the Nazis' murderous intentions, many prisoners survived the terror, and they returned on the 50th anniversary of Dachau's liberation, along with many of the liberators. Dachau can be remembered not only as a reign of indescribable horror, but as a memorial of remarkable witness to human sacrifice and goodness, and to the irony of history. Many of these moments are embodied in some of the individuals who returned to remember. Bill Bridgeforth was 31 when he served in the United States Army as one of 4 black warrant officers with the 1553rd Engineering Battalion. His unit fought in North Africa, Italy, and wound up following the 42nd Rainbow Division across southern Germany. The 42nd was the main liberator of Dachau. When the 50th anniversary came up, he mentioned his unit's role in liberating one of Dachau's subcamps to the pastor of his church.
I was in awe that he had actually been to such a place and been a part of doing such a thing, but I was frustrated and pained to have the notion one more time that somebody was not being honored because of the color of their skin or the nature of their historic background.
The Reverend Ken Crossman of the First United Methodist Church of Deltona, Florida, encouraged Bill to return for the 50th anniversary so his story could be told. But the complete story of the liberation of Dachau and its many subcamps is still being pieced together. Bill Bridgeforth's unit did not liberate the main concentration camp known as Dachau. Dachau itself controlled about 130 other camps, camps in which existence could be even more lethal than at the main camp. These soldiers look African American to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Do you recognize anybody here?
Possibly James Birch, who was a corporal in our outfit right there.
Today, most of the subcamps have been torn down. The terrain of a prosperous Germany looks different than a country under attack 50 years ago. Bill Bridgeforth says his unit liberated a camp just like this.
Well, we were looking for deserters from the SS that was hiding in the forest, and my colonel accidentally ran into an escapee of the camp and told them that they had just slaughtered 2,000 Jews that day, and they were in a mass grave. And we came back. I'm sure it was this camp. It was in this vicinity anyway.
This was the biggest,
We came back,
cemetery.
and we opened the gates and let out about 200 at that particular point.
Bill Bridgeforth and his unit, like other American liberators, weren't prepared for what they would encounter at these camps.
They knew that there were prison camps with prisoners that had been maltreated by the Nazis. They did not necessarily know there were mass epidemics, mass starvation, people at the extremes of existence, barely alive, not dead, not alive. They had no idea of the scope of medical relief that would be required almost instantaneously.
We were just skin and bones and skins, that's all. And you know, the skin even changed the color. It was so old.
Harry Guterman survived Dachau subcamp, Lager Number 4, which was located just a few miles from here. At age 16, he and somewhere between 30 and 60,000 other Jews worked to build 3 huge underground bunkers with 10 feet thick concrete walls.
In these walls here, you have a lot of people buried. When they poured the cement, it came in such a powerful way that some couldn't hold on and they just slipped in, and we couldn't pull them out.
Harry, Bill, and a contingent of survivors are touring former concentration camp sites. The memories are bittersweet.
Very difficult, very hard.
How did you make it? How were you able to endure?
I really don't know, but I wanted to live the worst way.
Harry Guterman says he has come back not only to remember the dead, but to build bridges to the people of a country that took away his family.
We cannot accept an apology for these people who are laying here. But we must leave this stand as it is in history and go and seek out the young people. How can we start out something as a dialogue? And that is what I'm seeking personally.
Many survivors have had difficulty talking about what they experienced. Many Jewish survivors lost their entire family in the Holocaust and found that a dark shadow had moved across their faith in God.
When I was liberated and I felt free again, my life changed, you know. I didn't believe in God anymore because I saw my mother go into the gas chambers.
But Frederick Scharfeneck did regain his belief in God and later converted to Christianity and eventually became a Lutheran pastor and emigrated to Australia.
Many Jewish people, they argue with God. God, why don't you do this? Why do you do that to me? You see, I argued too, but I didn't get an answer. But I got an answer from a Lutheran pastor.
And he said?
And he said, look, you have to look for the God of love. And there is a God of love. And after all, Jesus Christ was a Jew.
For a majority of Jewish survivors and Jews around the world, the search for meaning and the reason behind the experience of the Holocaust remain deeply troubling. But what the Nazis did to the Jews should be equally troubling for the Christian.
There are those who believe that the Nazis were really anti-Christian, not only value-wise, but their first strategy was the best way to delegitimize the child is to destroy and delegitimize the parent. Had they succeeded, they next would have gone against Christianity.
And evidence of that can be seen at Dachau. Pastors or priests who spoke out against the Nazis were sent almost exclusively here.
Dachau was the main concentration camp for clergymen. Priests and ministers from all different concentration camps were taken to the Dachau camp. There were great numbers of clergymen.
Cord Burgman leads tours through the main camp. How much did people around here know, Cord? That's the question many people have.
Very difficult to say.
The town sits close by this camp.
The town is not very far. 50 years ago, the town was kind of away from the camp, like 3 miles away of the camp. People knew that Dachau existed. People knew that the concentration camps existed. There were more than 1,000 camps in Germany and the occupied countries. How can you hide this fact?
Experts say that the German population knew more than they let on about what was happening. But what is especially troubling is that so few religious leaders spoke out about what the Nazis were doing.
But they were not interested in, in the Jewish citizens. So a lot of them were also anti-Semites. It was not their personal problem. They were in agreement with the majority, of Germans who finally accepted that, the Jews are the enemy of the state, or whatever the propaganda told them.
4 chapels have been built at Dachau, a Roman Catholic, Russian Orthodox, Jewish, and Protestant. The Reverend Heinrich Bauer is pastor of the Protestant chapel. Part of his role is to help Germans today deal with their past and keep it from ever happening again. Many times he leads groups of German police officers on tours of Dachau.
My purpose here is to tell people this happened in our country, from our people, in our history, and what do we have to do that we avoid similar developments in future.
He says people need to be vigilant and willing to speak up for the rights of others. One of the questions he has to confront daily is where was the witness of the church for those rights when the Nazis began their crusade against humanity?
The protest was little, and when it increased, it was not enough to overthrow the Nazi government. So many kept quiet. And this is, I would say, it's a guilt of the church. They omitted the witness, the biblical witness of God's love to all mankind.
I know my own sheep, and my sheep know me.
The 50th anniversary of Dachau's liberation began with worship services which honored the dead, the martyrs, and many remarkable witnesses to their faith. In Dachau, people of faith turned out to have a powerful witness. Hitler imprisoned people like Pastor Martin Niemöller, shown here after his liberation, for preaching against the Nazis. He became noted for his famous statement that chided the silent citizens of Germany, or any oppressing state. He said, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist."
When they imprisoned the socialists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a socialist. When they imprisoned the Jews and when they exterminated the Jews, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. When they imprisoned me, there was nobody left who could stand up for me. And I think that shows very well this silent majority that's just not there if people are exterminated, if people are persecuted.
Only a few Protestant leaders were imprisoned here. The largest majority of religious prisoners were Roman Catholic priests. This is Block 26 at Dachau. This is where a large number of priests were held during Dachau's existence. About 1,600 priests were kept here over the time of Dachau. More than 800 of them died. The Nazis didn't just target Jews for persecution, they also targeted anybody who worshiped the God of the Jews, and that would include Christians as well.
A state with a Nazi ideology persecutes the Jews. He also persecutes spiritually the God of the Jews, and the God of the Jews is the God of the Christians. We are in a very deep relationship with the Jewish people.
The memory of those priests is kept alive here. Sister, the guard tower is incorporated right into the convent.
Yes, it's really the entrance to the Carmelite convent, to the churchyard, and it should be the link between the concentration camp and our convent.
In 1962, this Carmelite convent was built right next to the concentration camp. The convent is made up of about 30 nuns, most of them cloistered. They spend 6 hours daily in prayer. Their rooms are built facing the former concentration camp.
The design is meant to confront our life with the concentration camp, what has happened here, and to take the suffering from the past, from the present, and from the future in our lives, in our prayers.
It is here that the sisters have kept the worship vessels made secretly by the priests in Barracks 26, crafted at the risk of their lives. It was the commitment and risk-taking of many religious prisoners that gave others hope to go on.
Dachau should not only be a museum of horror, because Dachau also can show you examples of resistance, of power, of strength, of faith in God or in Karl Marx or in Mohammed, I don't care, but of people who had a belief, who resisted. And I think this is also something that we can learn from this place and not only use it as a museum of horror.
About 1 million people a year visit the memorial site at Dachau concentration camp, but very few of those people go on to visit the historic city of Dachau. The town fathers have tried to change that by launching an advertising campaign. They say the citizens of this town are unfairly linked with the concentration camp. They point out that they had no choice in the location of the camp here, and they also say they didn't know what was going on during that time of the Nazi reign of terror. And they also note that during the election of 1933, which brought Hitler to power, this town voted against the Nazis. Georg Engelhardt is vice mayor of the town of Dachau. Does the town feel responsible for what happened at the concentration camp?
The town is not responsible, he said, because the Nazis have imprisoned the people and not the town.
He says some citizens of the town tried hard to help the prisoners. A town historian says that Dachau even put up some creative resistance to the Nazis.
Well, one day before the American army was arriving at Dachau, we had an uprising here in the town. This was an uprising of the inmates of the camp together with the inhabitants of Dachau, some inhabitants of Dachau. They occupied that city hall of Dachau.
The old Rathaus or city hall.
The old Rathaus. They occupied it. They gave tank alarm by the siren so that the SS thought the Americans already were in Dachau.
Were bringing their armor in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they stopped their marches. They stopped the evacuation marches of the inmates.
In some people's minds, there's been the feeling the town should have done something. Didn't it know what was going on? The town did do something, you're saying?
Yeah, the town did do something. So you have many things which were done. The people gave bread to inmates, and people got out information out of the camp to give them to relatives of those inmates. Of course, many of the Dachau people were no heroes. It were only a few people which really dared their life, their pretty life, to help to fight against the SS.
At the 50th anniversary of the liberation of the concentration camps, Germany is reflecting on why it was turned into such a beast by its leaders. At a reception for the 42nd Rainbow Division, members recalled their first encounter with the camp. Did you expect to find what you found there?
No, we didn't know anything about that. It was a complete surprise.
It was rough. I remember some guy, when I passed the gate, he says, "Don't go in there." I should have listened. Kind of hard to...
It's still tough.
Yes, very rough, very rough.
This reception is put on by the Bavarian government. Edmund Stoiber, the Prime Minister, makes sure the 42nd understands his feelings toward the liberators.
Ich möchte Ihnen danken.
And I would like to thank you that my children, 3, have grown up in an environment where they take it for granted to have such a relationship with the English-speaking world.
This is a deeply held belief in Bavaria and elsewhere through Germany that the United States was crucial to the liberation of this country at the end of World War II, and the United States was the friend and the ally in these last 50 years that have been really the backbone and the reason that Germany has succeeded as a democratic nation.
The 42nd is here not only to remember their role in the liberation of Dachau, but to make sure in the face of those who would deny the experience of the Holocaust that their role and the Holocaust itself is never forgotten.
We have a foundation whose sole purpose is to remember, and we have a way of putting it, that we don't forgive and forget. We forgive and remember. The forgiving part is what we see here in Germany today. The remembering is what we see in Dachau. And both of them are working very well.
This is their story as well as the stories of the survivors, because they are as much defamed by deniers who claim that this did not happen as are the survivors who experienced it.
Bill Bridgeforth attended this reception for the 42nd, though his unit was not part of this division. The 1553rd, in fact, served as support for the Rainbow Division at times, but he is the only African American here. The U.S. Army at the time was segregated. Did you and your comrades in arms who were black and let these people out have any reflections on that?
I have reflections
on the fact that you were a black unit involved in the liberation of one of these groups?
Even though realizing I was in a segregated army and coming here with a black outfit, me being of a minority in America, I realized that we were very proud of the fact that we were able to do that. We didn't feel that this could ever happen in America.
The irony is that on Hitler's list of undesirables for the Third Reich were not just gypsies and Jews, but also blacks. Hitler imprisoned blacks when he could.
It's ironic for two reasons, because the Nazis and the Germans systematically persecuted Afro-Germans and blacks along with Jews and gypsies as part of a racial agenda. In the Nuremberg laws, they include Jews, gypsies, and blacks as the three categories to be persecuted.
What did you think when you were tattooed?
I thought it's like the kettle, which is marked, should not be lost. Everybody should recognize to whom it belongs.
Germany seems to be making a change in terms of its attitude towards that period, denying less and working harder to understand what happened and helping a new generation form a new resolve. In part, this may be because of people like Max Mannheimer. He was raised in a Jewish family in Czechoslovakia. The Nazis sent him and his first wife, his mother, and three brothers first to Theresienstadt, then to Birkenau, on to Auschwitz, Warsaw, and finally Dachau. What helped him endure?
I was so desperate that I whispered to my brother, you know, we will get shovels and we will dig our graves. The best thing would be, I told him, to go to the fence, just to touch it,
and be electrocuted.
Over. And so the 17 years old Edgar asked me, who was at the time 23, are you going to leave me alone? And this one question changed my black thoughts. I was ashamed, of course, and I said, I have to survive. I have to be, I have to protect my younger brothers.
After he was liberated, he worked to help Jewish survivors reestablish their lives. But in the 60s, he had a paralyzing flashback of his camp experience. He was hospitalized and found he needed to talk about his experiences openly. So he began lecturing in German schools, who have made studying about the Holocaust a standard part of their curriculum. Being able to tell your story has helped.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I was, you know, I'm going sometimes every day to school.
Max Mannheimer, Vorsitzender der Lagergemeinschaft Dachau und Mitglied des Exekutivbüros.
That lecturing is paying off. This 14-year-old German student is reading an excerpt from Max's address at the liberation ceremony for Dachau. Her class is on a field trip. Her teacher says it is not a required trip. These students won't be studying the Holocaust for a few years yet, but they wanted to be here.
They are all amazed to see what people are able to do. They can't believe what they have seen.
This anniversary of Dachau reminded Germans and the world that this should never happen again. The anniversary also brought to mind the irony that these worship services are taking place on the very site the Nazis used to first try and destroy their opposition and those considered unfit for the 1,000-year reign of the Third Reich.
Every intelligent German today knows that something was wrong here, that a lot of things were wrong here. Now, we have to, as Jewish people, try to take the young people and say, okay, there was the Holocaust. We cannot forget it, and we should not forget it.
Right.
But we must start new someplace here. We must build a friendship among nations.
This memorial to Dachau carries tremendous sorrow. It reminds one of the biblical phrase, the stones cry out. It's almost as though one can sense the suffering and death that occurred here. But the living are also here, the living who went through Dachau, and they say, never stop watching, never stop speaking out about injustice, or there may be more Dachaus. They also remind us that in the midst of incredible night, there can be unblinking light. I'm Bill Turpie in Dachau, Germany, for Why We Care.